New videos every day.
We're going to do a little addition, a little commentary on the way out of this trap of having to stigmatize and label people, and the dynamic that puts people in terms of their having to manage their spoiled identity and my having to manage them in their spoiled identity, right? The dynamic of psychiatric oppression. I've got a few ideas about the way out. The first one is to never forget about human rights. This is a human rights issue. 1.5 million Americans locked up every year against their will who haven't committed a crime called psychiatric lockup and typically forcibly drugged. It's all about just remembering liberty and freedom and really considering inside of yourself the possibility that liberty and freedom can hold a higher value than using the state and the apparatus of the state, or using psychiatry and the labels of defectiveness to deal with things that are troubling and challenging, or the things that feel a little unsafe and endangered. It's kind of like the Patriot Act. You give up your rights in order to accept somebody's idea that you're going to be more secure. It's kind of similar here. Liberty and freedom trump, the idea that I'm going to lock somebody up who I think is dangerous, even though they haven't committed a crime. Respect, dignity, reverence. You've got to call these qualities forward and remember and really value them. Okay, that's number one. Number two, stigma removes uniqueness and it removes personal identity. Saying you're a schizophrenic like millions of others. You're an ADHD like millions of others. You're a bipolar like millions of others. You're a depression like millions of others. See? No. You're Lucy. I'm John. Right? I have a personal identity. This is me. These are my troubles. This is how I'm troubling. These are my challenges. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. It's not a label. It's an individual. And anything that you can do to support an individual's identity and relate to that and the uniqueness of that is the way out. You're all these things. You're not this one identity of this one label. You're a multiplicity of selves in different situations. Okay, the third thing, empathy. Empathy. Feelings and needs in that individual in that specific situation and the ability to communicate those. Labels and stigmas kill empathy, and you act as if you've explained something. You're attributing it to some alleged defect rather than really trying to understand what's going on, which is what really makes a difference. Those of you who looked at my writings know that I like reevaluation counseling. I like the understanding that when there is distress, and sometimes there is psychological distress, whatever you want to call it, upsets, hurts that are distressing, that there's an emotional expression in a venting or a crying or a shaking and trembling or a ranting and raving when you're insulted and frustrated, that actually helps to bring us back into balance. The problem is when it gets interpreted as a psychiatric symptom rather than some kind of effort to restore balance. Janet Foner, who's the liberation reference person for mental health system oppression or mental health system liberation in reevaluation counseling, says there's no such thing as going crazy. You can't lose your mind. What is mental illness really? It's a very long session seeking discharge or having lots of discharge without a counselor. There's some kind of process. There's some kind of way to understand and support what's going on and trust it a little bit instead of pathologize everything. That's good advice, I think. One of my favorite words for life these days is diversity. Diversity. Life thrives on diversity, whether it's an ecosystem at the water or in the woods, whether it's your financial well-being depending on one source of income or a diverse source. And definitely when it comes to people, You could say we got 10 million schizophrenics in this country, or you could say we have 10 million unique individuals, diverse, eccentric, whatever. and embrace that and realize that there's a value to society in that. The trouble with normal is it squashes diversity. That's another great value to remember. I think a lot of it comes down to common sense, and really working, It's like George Orwell said, to see what's in front of one's nose requires a constant struggle. And the final piece that my teacher, Leonard Roy Frank, really emphasizes, as well as my teacher, Thomas Zotz, is clarity of language. Mental illness is a metaphor that's made up. It's not a disease. And if you don't get clear about that, just like psychiatric drugs are not medicine, they're drugs that have the same type of effects and harmful effects. They're basically types of poisons. They're toxic. And a lot of them are virtually identical to the same drugs that get you locked up in jail. And if you play this thing where you accept the language of the framers and operate from the point of view that you have illness and medicine, you got some work to do to bring yourself back into clarity, to be able to deal with reality and speak from reality. So that's a piece of work that's good to do. So those are some thoughts about the way out.